What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Young Guns podcast. And today we have a very special episode. Today we'll be doing the 2024 NHL mock draft, as the draft is obviously coming up on Friday and Saturday. Round one will be on Friday, round 2 to 7 will be on Saturday. And we have a special guest with us today, Tyler, who you may have known him from last year's episode when we did the mock draft last year. He's back for another edition this year. So Tyler, welcome to the show. How you feeling, buddy?
I'm doing really good. Thanks for having me, guys. Looking forward to it.
Yeah. So obviously, today we're just going to be kind of going through our mock draft lists. Obviously, I've already made mine, so I'm sharing my list. Zach's going to be implementing his picks, and obviously Tyler's going to be implementing his picks, which Zach's going to do for us. And we're just going to kind of go through the video, give our thoughts on who we think is going to go, in the top 15. And then from there, there's going to be some honorable mentions of guys we think can squeak in there, and just kind of give our opinions and have a nice little talk and conversation. So obviously we're just going to jump right into it. The first one is very obvious. We don't really have to jump too much into this, but obviously Macklin Celebrini is the consensus number 1 overall selection. Obviously San Jose is going to take Celebrini at 1. There's no doubt about it. Mike Greer pretty much already confirmed that he's taking him. And he slipped it up a few times in a video, in a press conference as well. So, Sharks are taking Celebrini at 1. Where it gets interesting is at number 2. And this is where I want your guys' opinion. There's been some, mixed reports throughout the year and over the last couple of weeks that Chicago's been leaning towards Artem Levshunov, the defenseman from the NCAA, who's, been on everyone's list for a long time and has been probably known as the best defenseman in this draft. But there's also been talk about, talks like Caleb Lindstrom, Ivan Demidov, and even Anton Silayev to some extent. So obviously I have Artem Levshunov at number 2. Zach, where do you think Chicago goes with the second overall pick?
Well, I'm not going to be going in the same direction that you'll be going. I'm going with Ivan Demidov, number 2 overall. The reason being is I think Connor Bedard needs a co-star who's equally as dynamic and could control pace of a game at the same level that he could. It's not that I don't think Levshunov is a great, fantastic player worthy of being a top 5 selection, but I look at a team like Chicago and, based on positional needs, I think you could go pretty much anywhere with them. They have a good defenseman in Korshinsky, who's going to be continuing his NHL journey next year, who I'm pretty high on, as well as, Connor Bedard. I don't really qualify him as a prospect this year, but they have guys who are ready to take the next step, like Lucas Reichel. Nolan Allen is going to take some time to get to the NHL level, as well as Wyatt Kaiser. But I think, they could go pretty much anywhere with this selection. What I'll say on Demidov is that he's creative. His hockey sense is through the roof. He's got quick, nimble hands that allow him to create time and space for himself. And he's there's not. We always say with these Russian players, especially in past couple of years, that you can't watch these scouts, haven't been able to watch these guys live, but you do get the tape. And I think top Russian recruits have had a pretty high hit rate in past number of years. So I wouldn't be scared of the selection. And the last thing I'll say is that Matvey Michkov dropped in the draft last year because there was uncertainty if he was going to come overseas or not. But it is announced that he'll be joining the Philadelphia Flyers for next season. So I think that kind of soothes a little bit of tension for scouting teams and general managers. So yeah, I think Demidov is going to be box office just like Connor Bedard, and that's who Chicago should take at number 2.
Tyler?
Well, I think I'm in the lines of Luca here. I believe I have Artem Levshunov going to Chicago for their pick. And the reason being, I think even though they could wait for a guy like Logan Hensler, who's going to be a super high pick in next year's draft, I think they cannot wait to pair someone up with Kevin Korchinski. And I believe having a right shot defenseman who's pretty certifiable like Levshinov, very NHL ready, as he played with Michigan State, I believe, 35 points in 38 games, just
Yeah.
phenomenal. And he has a very complete game. And considering he's also considerably big at 6'2", which for a size at 18 years old, I think is very valuable for a right shot defenseman.
Yeah. I would agree. I think, Levshinov to me is probably touted as, one of, if not the best defenseman in this draft. I think he's the most complete defenseman in this draft.
Yeah,
He's
sure.
very good offensively. And I think for the Blackhawks, you look at their forward core and yeah, it's not the best, but I mean, at the same time, you do have Frank Nazar over there. I know that Lucas Reichel didn't have the greatest season this year, but he's still a very good player. And the 2025 draft class is very, very solid. And the Blackhawks will be a lottery team again this season, most likely. So obviously for me, you take Levshinov, who in my opinion, I think is a top 2 defenseman with the potential that he has. And I think for the Blackhawks, you secure yourself a franchise player at center with Bedard, and then you get yourself a franchise defenseman in Artem Levshinov. I think that's really good for their future. So that's kind of where I see it. That's why I put Levshinov at 2.
I don't think you could go wrong with that selection at all either. I think they're both locked to be quality NHLers. I think anybody striking in the top 5, even up to the 10 range in this draft, are pretty much locks.
Yeah.
And Levshinov, like you said, I think he's got a level that, he's clearly the number 1 defenseman in this draft. We'll get into it later about what we think about Silyev, but I think he's clearly the number 1 defenseman in this draft based on his skill set.
And moving on to actually the third overall pick, obviously with the Anaheim Ducks, they're going to take, in my opinion, Anton Silyev, the 6'7" defenseman from Russia. Now, the reason I decided to go with Silyev is simply for the fact that, look, he's a big defenseman. He's had a lot of hype around him. He's a big body. He doesn't get the most points, but he's very good in his own end. And the other thing too about him is, from what I've seen, is he's very physical. And if you look at the Ducks, and I know that it's not necessarily, I'm not basing it off best player available, but what I am basing it off of is, in my opinion, you get yourself a defenseman that's going to help your future, and you get a defenseman that no matter what, in a playoff situation, if you have to, get that shutdown role and be a defenseman that's going to, do it all for you, kind of like an Aaron Ekblad type for the Florida Panthers. I think that's exactly what Anton Silyev is going to be for any team in the National Hockey League, and that's why I have Anaheim at 3 taking him. Plus, if you look at Anaheim, they have a lot of forwards, right? Mason McTavish, Trevor Zegras, obviously, a suspect to trade rumors, but, Cutter Gauthier is another one, Leo Carlson. So they do have, a lot of good offensive pieces to build around, Troy Terry being another one. And in terms of their decor, it's not the best in terms of their future decor, right? So you add a guy like Silyev to your decor, that's pretty impressive, especially with a guy like Olen Zellweger as well, who's already on that team. Tristan Leno as well, being another one. I think that's pretty good for the Ducks. And you're getting yourself a guy who, like I said, I think in a playoff atmosphere, once the Ducks get there, you get a 6'7" big body defenseman who's going to throw hits and play really good defensively and can chime in offensively as well. I think you take that chance at number 3 for the Ducks, personally. Zach?
Yeah, well, I would. I'm going to be filling in basically for your number 2 selection, which is Levkinov. Sorry, I just botched that name. Levshinov. Sorry about that.
No
just based on what I've said prior, and I'll just touch on Anaheim a little bit. Look, other than Mentyukov, I'm not a big fan of Jackson Lacombe. Right. The fact that they lost Jamie Drysdale, yes, he'd been in the NHL, but he was still a young impactful potential defenseman. Their blue line needs a lot of help over there, and I think it's no better way to go with at that range. You're getting the best available player, regardless of position, and you're going to be adding defense for them, the position of need. So yeah,
Tyler.
Well, I agree with both of you in the sense that, and I'd like to add a little bit of my thoughts on Anton Silyev.
No problem.
Even he's a big boy, like 6'7" is pretty much Nikita Zadorov, Tyler Myers level.
Right.
And with that size, I think he's probably one of the best skating defensemen of this draft class, which if you can have a guy who can move like him at 6'7", that is very scary, and you cannot get by him very easily. You have to keep in mind too, he played in the KHL, which is arguably the second best league
In the world.
Playing against men the way that he did, I think it's going to show a lot of value. That being said, I think they go in a different route, and I have Caden Lindstrom. And the reason being
Interesting.
Wow.
is that understanding how Pat Verbeek likes the draft, he loves physicality. And I think by bringing on a guy like Cutter Gauthier for trading Jamie Drysdale and having someone like Leo Carlson, I think Caden Lindstrom is going to be a perfect power forward style of top six winger, and potentially have a trade with Trevor Zegras, who could be traded for a pick or some kind of young defenseman that's going to be coming up.
That's very interesting, and I the only reason I didn't pick the Ducks to take a forward is because I think they just have a lot already. Like I know that you go based on best player available in the draft, but I feel like even with Zegras gone, like you still have Leo Carlson, you still have Cutter Gauthier, you still have McTavish, you still have Troy Terry. Like it's a lot of really good forwards, and I just feel like you're bringing in Lindstrom into a scenario where it might not necessarily be, let's say, the most ideal. In terms of roster spots and whatever, but I think on defense, like they're probably more in need of a defenseman than a forward. But I mean I like the pick. It definitely makes sense, and it's definitely within the range that I think everyone would see Lindstrom going anyway. So it's not like it's a crazy take either. It's just I just see a different direction in that sense. Speaking of Caden Lindstrom, I have him at 4 going to Columbus, and my reasoning behind this is very simple. Obviously. You look at Celebrini, Demidov, obviously Levshinov are some of the Selayev, who's up there as well. And I think Columbus just looks at this and goes, who's the best player available after these three guys get taken? And in my opinion, it's either between Caden Lindstrom or Ivan Demidov. Now, for Columbus, they want a guy who's a big body. They want a guy who is going to take who's going to be a very good power forward, who's going to score goals for them, who's going to produce points, and who's going to put them in a better position offensively. And why not do that with a guy like Caden Lindstrom, who's been highly regarded, played a very good season this year in Medicine Hat with Gavin McKenna and Andrew Basha on his wing. I think you throw this guy on a team with Johnny Gaudreau, who's a very good passer, and obviously Adam Fantilli, and I think he thrives. I think you put him with Kent Johnson, he thrives. Like this guy screams exactly what the Columbus Blue Jackets are looking for. They need offense. I think that's one of the things that last year they struggled with. Now there's a rumor that they brought in Todd McClellan. I think Todd McClellan's the type of guy that he can get the best out of his players in some situations. And I think for Caden Lindstrom, learning under a guy like Todd McClellan, who was rumored and is rumored to be the next Columbus head coach, I think would be very good for him. So I do think Lindstrom goes forth to Columbus. The only concern with him, obviously, is he only played a select amount of games this year. He only played 32 games this year due to injury. Yeah. So that does, play a role as to whether or not he's going to be able to remain healthy for the rest of his career. It's not really an injury concern, but it is something to pay attention to as to figure out if the injury that he did suffer this season is going to affect him in the future. But besides that, I think Lindstrom's a perfect fit for Columbus personally.
Yeah, well, look, Caden Lindstrom has all the talent to pre-injury, had all of the praise to be up there with Celebrini for the first overall pick. He has all the skill. He's got the size to play the center position, and he's good defensively. There's not much more you could ask for, and scoring 27 goals in 32 games in Medicine Hat's program is very impressive.
Right.
But obviously his back injury is what's concerning a lot of general managers, and that's why a lot of the scouts and the analysts are having him drop on their boards. And I just thought, for Columbus, I thought Silyev would really add an other element to their group. I think they have needs all over the place, unfortunately, because they mortgaged a lot of their draft picks to remain competitive in previous years. The year they got Matt Duchene, around that time with John Tortorella, etc. So I think Celia, what I'll say on him, you guys touched on it a little bit, is that I describe him as a 6'7" unicorn, just because he could do anything on the ice. And for somebody to be that nimble with that size is just so impressive. He's, having put up some points as an under 18 in the KHL is impressive. He also got chipped in two points in 5 playoff games. He's able to compete with men. He's a smooth skating 6'7" defenseman, like I mentioned, who's been compared to Victor Hedman based on his sort of elusiveness. And I think at some point, the offensive upside will be there for him at the pro level. He just has to kind of grow into his body a little bit more. But I think, he's a great selection for Columbus at number 4, defenseman, a position of need for them.
Tyler?
This is where I have Anton Salayev, like Zach.
Okay.
For me, as mentioned before, and Zach mentioned, he's pretty much the unicorn of this draft class. He's probably the highest floor guy, which I guarantee you he's going to be at least a top 4 shutdown defenseman, which for already a pick, I think that shows incredible value. Someone perfectly that's seen is a Nikita Zadorov, like I mentioned, which Vancouver, they loved him. They loved him because he's physical, he can move, he can skate, and he shows incredible shot power. And if Salayev can develop that a little bit, I think you can get a 30-point per season defenseman who can just absolutely crush you.
Yeah. I get it. I mean, that's definitely an interesting pick at 4. I definitely do understand it for sure. You look at where Columbus is at, even just in terms of their team and defensively too. Like they would need a big body like Silyev. So I could definitely see that happening as well. At number 5 now, guys, I made this selection. I know I made this mock draft. I did this basically for what I want and also for what I think is going to happen. But the other thing
I always thought that was the reason why Demidov was going on the Habs.
But I'm going to say
right over here.
I'm going to be honest right now. This is only because I'm biased and I want this to happen. I want Demidov to go to Montreal at 5. There's been rumors that he might fall to 5. Will he fall to 5? I hope so. I'm high on this guy. Like, look, to me, he's the second best player in this draft after Celebrini, and it's not close. I think that if there's anybody that can go ahead and be able to be an elite point per game player in the NHL, it is Ivan Demidov. I understand he hasn't played in the KHL, and he also hasn't played much at international tournaments. In fact, he hasn't played at all in international tournaments. But this is a guy who played in the MHL, had 60 points in 30 games, just completely dominated that league, had 28 points in 17 playoff games. Like, you watch him play, he's just a mix of skill, pure talent. He's got a great shot. He can, get open he can get open in tight spaces. He's everything that you want in an elite player. He's exactly the type of player that Montreal needs. And look, if Montreal gets Demidov, like, to me, that's your star, your superstar player that you've been looking for years to come. It's right there. And then you have him and Slavkovsky with Caulfield, Suzuki, and Doc. Like that's, to me, that's a crazy forward core. So Ivan Demidov, I have him going to Montreal. It's a hope more than an actual belief. But if it does happen, I'm going to be running around the streets of Laval naked. But we'll see what happens. You guys are probably going to see me. You're going to see on the TV. You're going to be like, that guy's crazy. And oh my God, it's Luka. But yeah. So Demidov to Montreal at 5 is where I have him. He probably goes second or third overall to the Ducks or Columbus, but I'm hoping that he falls to Montreal because that would be insane for the Canadiens. And I hope they take him too if he does fall. Zach?
Well, maybe you guys are going to think this is a little bit of a reach, but I'm going with Jerome McGinley, the famous Calgary legend's son, Tij. So I have Tij going to the Canadiens, getting drafted by, like his father, a Canadian franchise. There's a lot I love about Iginla, and he's kind of rose up draft rankings in the past couple of months, just based on the fact that this guy is addicted to scoring goals. He scored 47 in the regular season. In the WHL, he chipped in another 9 in the playoffs. Forget about Cole Eiserman. I think this guy is the best natural shooter in this draft. He's big, physical. At the combine, he was like pretty much the best well-rounded athlete in all of the different physical tests. You know, he had a great under 18 tournament as well. That was good for his draft stock. I love the fact that he plays with edge. He's very dominant. He's a very dominant 50-50 battle player in corners. That's something that kind of compete level is something that always translates well to the NHL. He's physically mature. He's almost ready to go as an 18-year-old. The potential is there for him to be a great scorer at the NHL level. I see it as a safe pick for Montreal based on the fact that I think he does have a high floor, but I also think you can't go wrong. I see him as a 30-goal scorer perennially at the NHL, and I think the Habs, maybe my pick could have also gone the way of Caden Lindstrom, but I just think that the Habs want to build with Suzuki and Doc up the middle, and I think they could add another prolific winger, and that's what I think they'll be pulling off come draft day.
Tyler?
I think this is where the legendary future of Ivan Demidov goes. I think he goes to the Montreal Canadiens. And as Luca mentioned, I think he is overall wise for forwards, the second best forward of this draft. And I will mention, I have done a lot of scouting reports on Ivan Demidov. His mind and the way he uses it is very interesting. He loves creativity. He's just absolutely the definition of offensive creativity, considering he's got the amazing hands he has. He's got the amazing skating ability that he does have, that he can make a cut through the inside. He can make an open passing lane. And I believe he's got 180 style of vision, twice that. I think sometimes he'll have eyes in the back of his head. He'll know where his teammates are just 100% of the time. There are some inconsistencies here and there with his physicality, but that's going to come with time with every single prospect with this draft. I think you don't need to worry about that. And it was mentioned from his agent that he grew in size at 190, which is very promising, which for Montreal, you got to be ready to have some excitement later on.
Oh, I mean, I'm going to be excited.
This would be a slam dunk for the Canadiens if it does end up happening, by the way.
Oh, it is. It's going to be a slam dunk if it happens. It's just, more so like, the Canadiens had a chance to draft Michkov last year and they didn't do it. So I think I'm going to hold. It's more of a hope. It's a prayer. It's exactly what I want, but is it going to happen? We'll see what happens, and we'll see how the draft plays out in the first 4 picks before that. And then hopefully if he is available at 5, the Canadiens, do it and they take him. And if they do, then it's going to be a great story for the Montreal Canadiens, and it's going to be big for their future as well. At number 6, going to Utah, formerly the Arizona Coyotes, who are no longer in existence anymore. So rest in peace to the Oaks. But Utah, who, they'll be back. But Utah, who is coming in, new franchise, relocated as the Arizona Coyotes, obviously. And they're going to want to make a big splash for the 6th overall pick. And I think they're going to go with Zane Parekh. Now, I think the reason they're going to go with Zane Parekh is very simple. Zane Parekh is the best offensively gifted defenseman in this draft. Like, we talk about Levshunov, we talk about Silayev as like really good defensemen who can play two-way games and, who are really good in their own end, but also provide some good offense. Zane Parekh is pure offense. Like, we talked about this before. He's basically a B-Tech version of Erik Karlsson, right? And so I think for Utah, you add this guy to a team that has Dylan Genther, that has Logan Cooley, that has Clayton Keller. They have some really good offensive juggernauts over there. And then you bring in a guy like Zane Parekh, who is just, pure offense and guy who's going to be your first power play unit, probably going to get you like 60 points in an NHL season. Like that's exactly what Utah needs. And look, they don't have defensive prospects really, right? They haven't really found defensive prospects. They have Sean Dursey, who, last year had a pretty good year for Utah, for Arizona. But I think in general, Parekh is the type of player that Utah would need, and he's also flashy, right? And I think for Utah, being able to pick up a player like that at 6 overall, who can be, another version of Erik Karlsson, I think it's exactly what they need for the future, and it's perfect for them, especially for a team that lacks offense, and sometimes struggled to score goals last year. I think putting a guy who can control your power play and be a power play quarterback is exactly what Utah needs. So I'm going to go with Zane Parekh at 6. Zach?
Well, I do disagree with you on the fact that it's defensemen that they're lacking in their system. I think it's much more on the forward department, because yes, there's Logan Cooley and Dylan Gunther, but I don't think the upside is there to say like, okay, we have a prospect here, or a young player who's started in the NHL who could be an elite point per game player with that kind of upside. They're good players. I think they'll be bona fide top 6 players, but in terms of the upside, I'd really like for them to go with a Caden Lindstrom, because on my draft board, he's still available in this range. And like we mentioned before, he has all the skill offensively to be up there with Macklin Celebrini. Bearing the injury, that's why I have him falling down in my draft rankings. But I think that's kind of the move they should make to elevate that young forward core. And for their back end, I think they're pretty much Arizona is pretty much stacked, right? They have Maverick Lamoureux, who they drafted, Artem Duda, who's whatever, but I think they have guys that are there that could step in and do a job, and they have young guys at the NHL level as well. I just think Arizona, the best move for them would be taking a forward, and obviously at this range in the draft, I think that the highest upside, based on my selections, would be a guy like Lindstrom.
Tyler?
And you guys are forgetting about one defenseman that Arizona has in their prospects pool still, and that is the other version of an Anton Silayev. That is Dmitry Simishev that they selected last year.
Right.
Which
that's who I was missing. Yeah, I had him written down. I was missing him.
That being said, I think they still go for a defenseman here, but not one that you guys may expect. I have them selecting Zeev Boyum. For me, I think he's very unique in the way he's seen as a two-way style of defenseman for me, with more of the offensive touch. I think he could be a 60-point, 65-point offensive defenseman style who can play a very reliable two-way game. He's got one of the more smoothest skating style of defensemen of this draft at his size. I think he shows reliability. And when you look of what his track record is recently, he won another NCAA championship with the University of Denver. And the main person who started that, it was Zeev Boyum with his brother and Shai. I think for me, Arizona wouldn't want to let this kid go. I think he could be a potential gem in this draft.
That's interesting. I wasn't sure with the Utah pick at 6. Obviously, I'm high on Parek. I'm also, a big fan of Buyum, but I have Buyum going a little bit later at 8 when we're going to get to that. But definitely not a bad selection and not a bad take at all. I definitely could see all three, of the next remaining picks, kind of be interchangeable depending on what the team needs. But definitely not a bad selection for Utah at 6 with Zeev Buyum. And also Zach for Lindstrom. Like, yeah, it definitely makes sense. I think if you have to go based on best player available and obviously based off your mock, like, yeah, Lindstrom would probably be the best player available in that range. So definitely makes sense as well. At number 7, I know Zach already put his pick in, so I'm glad we agree. But
Proudly.
Sam Dickinson going to Ottawa at 7. Look, to me, this is exactly what Ottawa needs, right? And I look at what they're trying to build. They have Jake Sanderson, they have Thomas Chabot. They're potentially going to move Jacob Chikrin. And what other replacement would you want to have for Jacob Chikrin than Sam Dickinson, right? And Dickinson's a little bit more offensively gifted. He's a little bit better defensively as well in terms of where Chikrin was at his age and in his draft class. I think if you get Sam Dickinson and you pair him, on a team with another right-handed defenseman for Ottawa, I think, you've got yourself a really good top 4 with Jake Sanderson. And then, maybe you find a way to see what you can do with Thomas Chabot, maybe trade him for a right defenseman of the sort. I think there's definitely a lot of possibilities of what Ottawa can do, but adding Sam Dickinson to their decor for the future would be absolutely huge for the Senators and will put them over the top already with the fact that they have, like I said, Jake Sanderson. I think it would just be a really good 1-2 punch over there on the left side. So big fan of Sam Dickinson, and I think going to number 7 Ottawa it just makes a lot of sense. And they would be getting, in my opinion, the best defenseman available out of my list personally.
Yeah,
Zach?
I do agree. I agree with you that he would be the best defenseman available in both of our draft ranges. I see this pick as for Ottawa. This is an absolute lock. He's a kid who's from the area, and
Right.
he's actually expressed a public desire to join the organization. He said he'd be thrilled about it. I'm sure it's his favorite childhood team. Maybe he grew up following the Sens, but there's the pride factor that's there. But put that aside, and you have a great player in Sam Dickinson, who's so well rounded, who's a great skater, who's one of the best two-way defensemen in this draft. His offense is maybe not as good as others like Zane Parek or Levshinov in this draft particularly, but Sam Dickinson it's very impressive what he's able to do, and people describe him as a guy that just elevates the play in whatever situation he's put in. You could basically, his coaches could basically trust him in any scenario, and he's somebody who always knows how to make the right play to keep things moving and to lead by example via his play on the ice. I think the upside is there with him. He might not be a high-end point producer, but somebody who could be very complimentary to, like you mentioned. Well, we have two lefties here, maybe not a Jake Sanderson, but I think in the future he has the upside to get those top pair minutes at the NHL level. Yes, the Sens would be adding another left-handed shot defenseman here. Either Chikrin or Chabot, I think, will be traded this offseason, so there'll be a spot there that would open up for Dickinson in the future. And a lot of people are saying he's a player who'll be NHL ready either this year or next. So yeah, I know Ottawa's need right now is on the right side, but I think the Dickinson he's a tier above the guys like Parek, who I do think has high upside, but I think Dickinson is such a refined prospect that Ottawa just can't miss on with this pick.
Tyler?
Not exactly an Ottawa guy, as he's closer to the Toronto area. However, that being said, I think by far he is my favorite defenseman of this draft class. I cannot tell you how many times I've seen him. I've got to connect with him in person while I was in Moncton for the CHL Top Prospects game. He is arguably one of the most down-to-earth human beings, character-wise, that I've met. I think he shows great leadership, and for an Ottawa team that's still quite young, on the younger side, I think Sam Dickinson can provide deep leadership, which I won't be surprised if he may become the captain next season. Regarding to some of his traits, his skating is world class, as we like to call it, 10-2 skating, as he is excellent at his crossovers. There may be some points where his decision making is not the best, but that being said, I think when it comes to two-way, with a little bit of the offensive touch, with the size that he has, I think, legitimately speaking, Sam Dickinson is a not just 100% luck, but 1,000% luck for the Ottawa Senators. Steve Staios would be jumping to the stage to go draft Sam Dickinson.
You know what's funny, guys? This is the first time that all three of us have agreed on a pick. So,
besides Macklin Celebrini.
Besides Celebrini, but I don't count that because like that's like the obvious one, right? It's
obvious.
Like the consensus. So, but like realistically, this is the first time that like besides Celebrini that we've agreed on a pick. So that's interesting. Maybe that'll actually happen Friday. So we'll see. Moving on to number 8. Obviously, Tyler has him higher at number 6. Zach doesn't have him on his list yet. Maybe he has him at number 8 like me, but I believe Zeev Buium ends up in Seattle. Now, the reason for this is, look, he's the next best defenseman available. Seattle is going to go with best player available. Buium had a fantastic season in the NCAA. Like Tyler mentioned, he won. He won the tournament with
Saginaw,
with Denver.
with Denver.
With Denver, and obviously for Buium, it's he was world class in that in the NCAA tournaments. In the Frozen Four, he was fantastic. So I do think that Seattle gets themselves the best player available here, and I think he would bolster their decor in very different ways. You look at Vince Dunn and what they have going over there with him. They have Riker Evans as well on defense, who could be a decent prospect. I do like what Seattle's done in terms of drafting prospects. Obviously, last year they drafted Shane Wright. 2 years ago they drafted Shane Wright. So there's definitely some expectations with Seattle as to what they can do moving forward. But I think Buium would help that core and would just make Seattle better. And I do think that he would be probably the best defenseman in their prospect pool at this point. So big fan of Buium. I think at 8 it makes sense. And in my opinion, they go best player available, and he, in my opinion, would be the best player available based on my list. So that's who I have going at 8. Zach, you can
I'm
go.
going with our boy Zane Parekh, who already came off on your board.
Yeah.
Many describe him to have similar tendencies to Erik Karlsson, just based on the way that he plays in the offensive zone. He looks so casual. He's smooth skating. He has the offensive. He has the IQ to always know when to join the rush at the appropriate moment. I think the criticism with him is that he's a little bit soft defensively. He's gotten caught more times than you'd like playing in the OHL this past season, and But if he is somebody that is gonna refine in a way that he'll hit his potential, we're looking at a guy that could be point per game and could be absolutely box office offensively, just based on his creativity, his hockey skill, his puck skills for a defenseman, and the way that he could move. Obviously, Seattle is pretty loaded with defensive prospects. Well, there's Riker Evans, who did have some, I believe, had some time in the NHL this past year, but who's still developing. Lukas Dragicevic, who is one of my names of note during our video last year. I'm still high on Caden Price as well. They're all still on a trajectory to play consistently at the NHL level, potentially all top 4 defensemen at some point. But Seattle, I think, is a team that is just loaded everywhere. That I think they, even at 4, that I think they can't really miss on a guy like Parekh because of his upside. So I think for them, getting a guy with the dynamic ability of Zane Parekh is going to be a nice contrast to the other defensemen they do have in their prospect pool. So I think Seattle will be going with our boy Zane Parekh at number 8 overall.
Tyler?
I'm on the same boat as Zach. I also have Zane Parekh at number 8, going to the Seattle Kraken. As we mentioned, I think by far he's the best offensive defenseman of this draft. His hands are absolutely nasty, though he just lugs the puck like it's nothing. For a guy who can score 30 goals from the back end, I think it's nuts for what he does. I think Seattle, for this spot, he is the best player available. I think by far. There are some deficiencies in this game, like physically, but other than that, I think by far he's the most gifted player at this spot.
Yeah,
Interesting.
And I think size is a thing we didn't mention. So he's actually listed at 5'10",
right.
a little bit under 180 pounds. That's a point of concern with him. But I think this guy is like Tyler, which you said, with his hands, his creativity, the way he was dynamic, even for Team Canada at the junior tournament, is something that teams can't deny his level of skill, and I think that's going to merit him a top 10 selection in this draft.
And you got to keep in mind too, he is a Memorial Cup champion with the Saginaw Spirit, which he, by unfortunately me mistaken with William, a little bit mentioned before, which may have been a spoiler. I think he was the key part for the Saginaw Spirit and their Memorial Cup win.
Interesting. Moving on to the Calgary Flames at number 9. I went a little bit more. I went based on what I would like to see, but also what I think could happen. In my opinion, I think
it's in the range.
I think Tij Iginla gets reunited with his father in Calgary, and they go with the father-son duo over there, and he gets to play his dream of, well, I don't know if it's a dream, but playing for his father's team, and getting drafted by his father's team. So I think Tij Iginla to Calgary is at number 9 makes a lot of sense. But I will say this, like Zach mentioned, he's a pure goal scorer, scored 47 goals this season. With the Kelowna Rockets in the WHL, had a really good playoff run, scored 9 goals in 11 games. He had 15 points. This is a guy that I think would make Calgary better instantly. Like, we talk about a team that, was really mediocre throughout the year this year, and just traded away Jacob Markstrom. They're clearly on, the verge of looking to either rebuild or retool. And they do need offense, right? And this is a team that, traded away Elias Lindholm last year at the deadline. They brought in Kuzmenko. They're looking to try to bolster their team. They already have guys like Jacob Pelletier and Matthew Coronado, Connor Zary as well. And if you add a guy like Tij Iginla to that forward core, I think it makes Calgary a better team. And they, it provides a guy who I think can score 30, 35 goals in the NHL. So, he's a very good skater. He's got good hands. He can shoot the puck like I think one of the best shooters in the draft for sure. And I think that, the opportunity to play in Calgary and to play for his father's team, I think is something that, any kid would dream of if their father did play in the NHL. So I think for that reason, and for the fact that, Calgary has an opportunity to draft an Iginla, I think is what they're going to go ahead and do. So I have Tij Iginla going 9 to Calgary. Zach?
So I have somebody that I'm pretty high on for this draft, which is Konsta Helenius, the two-way Finnish center, who Luca, I just saw you shrug your head a little bit at that selection. I'm going to wait for you to pick him apart in maybe a couple of minutes. But I see him as a guy that has great puck skills. That is probably the smartest, I would say the smartest player in the draft, just based on the way that he reads the game, how good he is on both ends of the ice. He has the potential to be one of the best two-way centers in the NHL, despite his size at being 5'11" and not the heaviest. He's played with pros in the Liga in Finland this year, and he's absolutely thrived. He's been able to get points. Let me pull this up in a second. I don't know if you guys have it on your stat sheets, but he was very productive in the Liga this year. He had 36 points in 51 games, and then he contributed as well at a pretty good pace during the playoffs, where he was a point per game. So look, we always kind of maybe not neglect but underestimate these European prospects who play pro for a full year while they're still 17 years old. To get that experience against pros and guys who are bigger and a game that's more structured and more difficult to break through it. And then, they have that invaluable experience and they could translate it to a better degree most times to the NHL level. Look, I know the NCAA is great and all, but that experience playing pros, Slavkovsky did it. He was a first overall pick. Austin Matthews, of course, had that year in playing in Switzerland. But I think he's probably refined his game to a pretty good degree, just playing with pros. He's somebody who's great, like I said, defensively. He stays with his checker. He takes away passing lanes. He's also got a strong defensive stick, but offensively, he does have that ability as well as a play driver. Pretty well-rounded Finnish kid. I think in my range, in my draft pool, I think he's probably best player available. Calgary would need a high-end center in their pool, so I think this is would be a great pick for them and a great fit.
Yep. Tyler?
So I'm on Lucas train here. I have Tija Ginla going back home where he belongs with the Calgary Flames. And you can't say it any much better than this. He has scored pretty much a 50-goal season in the WHL, which is pretty much nuts. He's been clutch at the U18 Worlds, which he played with a good connection of mine, which I'll mention later on. He was unbelievable. His conditioning, he's just a horse. He's just a horse on a saddle that he's got an engine. He's got a huge motor, which teams really value that. And it's not really a biased thing for me, him going to Calgary. I think just skill-wise, he may be the best player available for me at that point.
I definitely agree. I think it definitely makes a ton of sense to do that. Obviously, Hellenius, I think at 9 is ridiculous, but that's my own opinion. I'm not too high on him. We're gonna get into that. I mean, I have him at 15 for a reason, but we'll get there when we do. Moving on to the Devils, I have Carter Yakimchuk going number 10 to New Jersey. New Jersey need right D. I know that they have Dougie Hamilton, they have John Marino. They're a team that I think is in a position where they're looking at a guy like Brett Pesce. I think for the future, this is a team that can add more on defense. I think they've got some good offensive players. Maybe they go with a guy like Seneki as well. But for me, I just think that Yakimchuk is a good player for them. To kind of build around, and even if he's not necessarily, let's say, going to be on the Devils, maybe they move him for some picks or they move a right D. But with how bad Dougie Hamilton dealt with the injury that he had this year, there is some concern there. And obviously they have Simon Nemec. Maybe having Yakimchuk as a top 4 defenseman for the future might not be a bad idea. And he shoots right, so that's a big thing for teams that draft right-handed defensemen. They're not easy to come by, so when they are available, you should take them. And obviously for Yakimchuk, very good season for him, 71 points. He scored 30 goals as well, playing in WHL for the Calgary Hitmen. So I believe, it's a very good pick for New Jersey at 10. And obviously, being a Calgary native, maybe there was some people that looked at him and said maybe he goes to Calgary at 9. That could still happen. I just think New Jersey at 10 is where it's going to end up for him. Zach?
Well, I have Ziv Buyem. I know you guys both covered him already, so I won't say too much about him other than the fact that he has the kind of puck possession and offensive skill that would be great for him on a power play or just contributing offensively 5-on-5 at the NHL level. I think that's something that's going to translate really well for him. In terms of New Jersey, yes, they have the kind of explosive offensive defenseman that they do currently with Luke Hughes. You mentioned Doug Hamilton will be coming back from an injury. John Marino's a free agent. But in their system, Seamus Casey is really the best shot they have at a top four defenseman. And he's might not even be a top four defenseman. He's still kind of an iffy prospect. So I think Buyam would be just an easy move for them to make, to get a guy who has upside to be a pretty high-end top four at the NHL level. So I think that's what a move that New Jersey would be pretty happy about.
Tyler?
Well, I think I'm on the different end of the spectrum. I did not choose a defenseman like you guys have. I have Cole Yzerman going to the New Jersey Devils as the 10th overall pick.
Oh no, big Cole.
I think legitimately he's the best goal scorer of this draft class. Legitimately speaking, there was a certain point in time, a long time ago, he could have been the second overall pick, right behind Macklin Celebrini. That's not realistic at this point, but I think as a top 10 selection, he's starting to bring the physicality now, which I've been really liking. As mentioned, he's pretty much the new version of, like, let's say an Ovi, but in the sense of him having his sweet spot of crushing those one-timers. He's one of the best at doing so when he played with James Haggins, which he may be the next year's first overall pick. I think the chemistry with someone like a Jack Hughes is going to be undeniable.
Yeah, I do see that as a potential option for the Devils. I think Yzerman would fit really well with Jack Hughes and obviously Nico Hischier and Jesper Bratt. So not a bad selection at 10. Moving on to Buffalo at 11, I have Beckett Sedecki. Now, this is a guy's a late bloomer because, he started off the season as a guy that probably wasn't even going to go in the top, I would say, 15. And so he kind of, shocked everybody with how well he played at the end of the season with the Oshawa Generals. 68 points, 27 goals, 41 assists in 63 games with the Oshawa Generals. But in the playoffs, he absolutely dominated. 10 goals, 12 assists, 22 points. He was the leading, scorer for his team. He dominated in every aspect. And this guy just thinks the game at a different level, right? He's a very good player. He's smart on the puck. He can use defenders to screen the goaltender to get a good shot off. He's very smart when he has the puck on his stick. And what I like about him too is, he's got a little bit of a cocky attitude. Not necessarily cocky in the sense where, he's like, oh, he's arrogant, but more cocky in the sense that he's confident and he believes in himself as a player. And so I think for that reason, he's going to thrive well on a team like Buffalo, who, always seem to struggle in terms of being able to make the playoffs and grabbing goal scorers and finding a guy who can be clutch in big moments. I think, with the fact that Tage Thompson had a down year last year, and, obviously with potentially rumors that they're going to buy out Jeff Skinner, maybe they can add a guy like Sedecki to this team, with already the likes of, Zach Benson and Tage Thompson being there, Yuri Kulich and obviously Isaac Rosen as well, who are in the minors for Buffalo. They would just keep adding to their forward core. I think Sedecki fits what the Sabres are trying to do. And like I said, this is a guy that, he's clutch in big moments. He showed up in the big moments and, he's got a lot of swagger and confidence about him too. So I think it's a good pick for Buffalo. I think at 11, it's going to make a lot of sense for them to go there. Zach?
I'd go in the direction of Carter Yamanchuk, the defenseman that you mentioned prior. I think, it's very rare to have the kind of ability that he does. He's the first defenseman in WHL under 18 defenseman to score 30 goals. I think that's just nothing short of impressive. And just the fact that he's just such a precise player, the way he creates a high volume of chances, creates great looks for his teammates. He can manipulate opponents, makes plays with perfect timing. Just somebody who's has that kind of ability and that knack that's going to translate to the pro level in terms of being able to move the puck and being able to basically avoid pressure and create time and space for himself as a defenseman. He's been described this way by Craig Button, and I think it's a way that like kind of encapsulates him pretty well. In the play, he creates a high volume and better quality of looks than most defensemen could access. So that's high praise for him. He didn't have the best under 18 tournament. He was pointless. There's that to note. He's a defenseman who's 6'3", adding a right-handed shot behind Rasmus Dahlin potentially in Buffalo. I think this is a great pick for them. But I also think that they could have went with somebody of the likes of Lichenko or even another defenseman available. But I think that Yakinchuk, is probably the best one and probably the one with the highest upside.
Tyler?
I also have Beckett Seneca going to the Buffalo Sabres. And I will mention later about Carter Yakimchuk. Personally, I am not a big fan of him, which I'll get to that later. Beckett Seneca, which I will mention, last year he was 5'10". This year he's 6'2", and he's got skating like incredible. Like the mechanics were not great in his first couple of years, but he's really seemed to figure it out. His hands are at another level. His creativity is at another level. I've got to watch him, and it's been a special time watching the stuff that he does. And I think it's just going to bring another end of the spectrum for the Buffalo Sabres, being another top 6 guy who could be a killer on the power play.
I definitely agree with that. I think he's a guy that's been a big riser, and he's shown towards the end of the season that he's definitely got a lot more to his toolkit than what was previously expected of him. At 12, now this for me, I think would be probably the steal of the draft in my opinion, and I think that's Philly taking Cole Yzerman. Now, the reason I believe that is I think for Philly, especially with the news that Matvei Michkov is coming to North America, having Matvei Michkov play on the Philadelphia Flyers is going to be huge for that team. But Philly, one of the things that I think has always been a big issue for them is they've always struggled to find, consistent scoring, right? They had Claude Giroux for a long time, and they were really dominant with him. They had Voracek at times as well. Jeff Carter and Mike Richards played for them a long time ago. But lately, they haven't really been able to find someone that's been able to do it consistently. Konechny had a good year this year, but still, even him, you get a hit or miss. With Cole Yzerman, like Tyler alluded to, he would likely be the best goal scorer in this draft. This is a guy who could shoot the puck from anywhere. He's deceptive. He's got a great shot. He's able to pick his corner at any point. He's got a bullet of a shot as well, and he's not afraid to just shoot the puck. And I think for Philadelphia, you need that type of player. Is he going to necessarily get along with what John Tortorella is in Philadelphia? Who knows? Because Torts is very big on the defensive side of the game, which is something that Cole Yzerman does lack. But I think for Philadelphia, if you can look past that and you can look at the fact that this guy can hit 40 goals in the NHL, if you put him in the right situations and you put him on the power play, I think for me, it's a no-brainer. And I think at number 12, Philly would be getting a steal. They'd be getting the best player available at this point. And for Cole Yzerman, I think going to Philadelphia and playing with Matvei Michkov, that duo for the future could just be absolutely a force to be reckoned with. So, Zach, what do you think?
Well, I think Cole Yzerman is definitely not a bad shot for the Philadelphia Flyers. But I will be going with Jet Lichenko, who's somebody who played in the Ontario Hockey League this past season, but the year prior was considered only a grinder who went from scoring 14 points that year in 46 games to this year being their leading scorer after Mathieu Poitras left and got drafted by the Boston Bruins. He's somebody who took the reins as the team's top center, was productive and obviously transformed himself into the kind of prospect that would merit him a first round selection. He's somebody who has a lot of speed, who's great on the forecheck. He's got a two-way game. He's great at carrying the puck through the neutral zone. He's somebody who's also not afraid to get in your face. He's good in his own end with his defensively with his stick. Good two-way center who could chip in pretty well offensively. A lot of people consider him a workhorse and a speedster. He's one of the youngest players of in the draft, is what I also note. Born on August 21st. I think he's somebody who's got the kind of upside that scouts are looking for. But Cole Eiserman is not a bad shout either. But I'm very high on Luchenko, and I think that he could really grow his game into the pro level.
Tyler?
This is where I have Consta Hellenius. I have him going to the
no.
For me, he is the definition of a John Tortorella style of player. And the reason being is that he highlights the definition of two-way ability. For me, he's one of the best, if not the best, two-way forward besides Macklin Celebrini of this draft class. For me, he's not the high upside first line guy that you'll see. He's not the most creative with the puck, but he'll make the right plays at the right time. But he's a face-off guy. He's very, for me, like a comparison, I have him a little bit of a mix of a Braden Shen of the St. Louis Blues that I had, very similar style of guy, and someone like Mikko Koivu, very similar to the Minnesota Wild that long time ago. One of the best two-way forwards that wasn't seen that much, considering Minnesota was an average team, which made him underrated. And I think Hellenius is in that realm. He's not the first-line guy, but he's a for sure second-line centerman.
I don't know. I'm not too high on Hellenius. Well, like I have him at fifth. I don't think he's that good. I think he's not necessarily the most skilled player. I also don't think that, I don't really see the upside with him. But I mean, everyone's got their own opinions. Obviously, everyone sees things a different way. Luchenko's an interesting one. Even him, I think he rised up the charts a little bit, quickly and a little bit too high. But you know what? I think at 12, it's an interesting pick. It's definitely, I think, a bit high for him, but it's not a bad shout by any means. Moving on to pick number 13, which would be the Minnesota Wild. I have them taking my favorite player and the player that I am probably the highest on out of anyone in this draft class, and that's Michael Brandsegg-Nygaard. This guy, to me, I watched him I watched the World Juniors when he was playing for Norway. I watched him at the World Junior Championships. I watched him at the World Championships as well. This is a guy who I believe is going to take the NHL by storm, and he's going to make it, he's going to make it like his own, basically. I think this guy has the potential to do something special in the NHL. I love his game. I love the way he plays. I love, the way he moves the puck, the smarts that he has. I think he's one of the smartest players in the NHL in this draft class. Just the way he thinks the game above his peers, like the fact that he was able to carry Norway in this World Juniors and actually make them, somewhat competitive. I think him and someone else in this draft as well, Stian Solberg, I think were very impressive for their national teams. And I know that people don't always talk about, World Junior tournaments or international tournaments as like a reference point, just because, sometimes they're like, oh, it's a short amount of games and it's hard to tell. I think for me, Nygaard proved in both the World Championships and the World Juniors that he's able to compete against guys his age, and that, even in the World Championship, playing against men and playing against some of the best players in the world, I think he showed that he was able to put his own. And the fact is that, this guy's playing in the SHL. I think, the sky's the limit for this kid. And there's top 6 potential for this guy as well. Put him on your power play, put him on your penalty kill. He can do it all. And I think for Minnesota, on a team that, has struggled over the last couple of years, I think if you throw him on a line with Joel Eriksson Ek or even on the line with Kirill Kaprizov, I think he can absolutely fly So I think this would be a really good pick for Minnesota if they take him at 13. That's my pick. Brian Nygaard.
I'm going to be going with Cole Eiserman. Well, first of all, with Cole Eiserman, it's very impressive what he did. Obviously, beating Cole Caulfield's record for the development program.
Yep.
But he is described as selfish and one-dimensional. That he's mostly a shooter and is not above average in anything else. He's probably Paul McKenzie says he's got the best one-timer in this draft based on his goal scoring record. I think that's fairly accurate. But what is he doing away from the puck? I think he's just he's had too many inconsistent performances. I think in the U.S. program, he's a player that's also that could lack chemistry with his teammates at times. But despite that, I think he's a good scorer who's going to translate to some capacity to the NHL level. Definitely worthy of a first-round pick just based on his specialized skill set alone. I think it's very rare to find a player that has that kind of nose for the net and that just could basically just knows how to get in the areas to score goals where other players can't or don't know how to get to. Another thing on him is that he's injury prone and there are questions on his character, but he definitely has the talent. And if he could get things together and mature as not only a player but as a teammate, I think he could potentially be a perennial 30 goal scorer at the NHL level. But I think there's some concerns in his regard.
Tyler?
I went back and forth with this one. I had originally Eisman there, but he went earlier for me at New Jersey. This time I have a high ceiling guy, which I believe Minnesota wouldn't be scared of doing, and that is Berkeley Catton of the Spokane Chiefs. For me, he is the Jack Hughes style of player. I don't think he's going to be Jack Hughes, but stylistically, I think he is the Jack Hughes style of player in this draft. He's on the smaller end of the spectrum, but he's got great playmaking. He's got great hands. His skating, agility-wise, is really good, but acceleration could be worked on a little bit, and he'll need to gain some strength. But I think when you're looking at the ceiling that he has, I think he could legitimately be a 60, 65, 70-point guy. And you got to mention, too, with the depth charts of the Minnesota Wild, besides Joel Eriksson Ek and Marco Rossi, there's not much at center. And I think he's going to fit that excellent second-line center build perfectly. He's going to be the center version style of like a Matt Zuccarello, I find, personally.
Interesting. At 14, obviously I'm going to go with the San Jose Sharks. That was originally the Penguins pick. It's now San Jose's due to the fact that the Penguins, had to give it up in that trade for Erik Karlsson. I have Berkeley Catton there. Now, this one too was one that I had to think back and forth on. I'm going to be honest when I say this. I think he's a very good player. I'm just not as high on Catton as other people are. I think this guy's, got top six potential. I think my only concern with Catton is I'm not sure, what his ceiling is. I think he's a guy that can be a 50-point player in the NHL, but I also think he's got some smarts. I think the fact that he lacks, a little bit of physicality might be concerning, and I'm not sure if that's ever going to show up. But if you're a team like San Jose, you've got an opportunity with Celebrini. You obviously have Will Smith on your team. You have Quentin Musty as well, who you drafted last year. I think this is an opportunity for them to look at another forward. And I think Catton would fit kind of what, the Sharks are looking for. And he's a little bit of a risk too, right? Because of the fact that, he's a smaller forward. He's got a little bit of skill, but, maybe he doesn't have as much upside as everybody else. I think it's a risk that the Sharks are willing to take. And also, I mean, for him, if it doesn't work out as a center, he can always play on the wing. So I think San Jose takes Berkeley Catton at 14. But yeah, that's my opinion. Zach?
Well, I have so it's the San Jose Sharks' second pick in this draft. I have them taking winger Tarek Parasak. who was with the Prince George Cougars and the WHL. I think an 100-point season for him is something that's definitely worth of note. It doesn't happen. It definitely doesn't happen very often for 18-year-old, 17-year-old prospects. He's somebody who's a great possession player, who knows how to position himself well to get to perfect spots. He has a great hockey sense that his timing is almost always perfect in terms of making plays. And he's also a good finisher. He's somebody who's been going up a bunch of draft boards just based on this year as a 17-year-old. And he's somebody I think will elevate that group and add to the prospect pool in San Jose, because I think that they have a prospect pool that is just in desperate need of skill, because they've mortgaged so much of their future in the past 10 years in the Joe Thornton, Patrick Marleau era, that I think they just could take. They're just going for skill and upside, and I think none of these picks in this range, what I'm trying to say, are bad picks for them, because I think this range from 15 to 25 is pretty. You could almost flip a coin on all of these picks, but right. For me, Parasak is definitely the move I would make for them.
Tyler?
Even though I'm not as high as you, Zach, on Parasak, considering about his toolkit, I don't know what his ceiling is going to be at the NHL level. That being said, I think the Sharks are going to go for a defenseman here, and I think this is where Stian Solberg goes.
Interesting.
And I think the Sharks have zero defense. And it's clearly seen, considering they were the worst team in the NHL. But Solberg is a guy who's really interesting to me. I don't think he's going to be the top 2 pairing defenseman, but he's going to be a perfect number 3 and number 4. His toolkit, his size is excellent. His skating is right there with you. And then you got his excellent, he's a good puck carrier, but he's a better distributor, I find. And he displays great physicality. Already being 205 pounds, which you could grow an extra 10, 15 pounds, I think he's going to be a beast of a top 4 defenseman. Someone similar, I find, is someone like Brandon Carlo. I think he's going to be that similar pairing top 3, 4 defenseman who's going to be an excellent penalty killer.
Interesting. That's a very, very interesting pick. I actually have Solberg a little bit lower in my board, but just because I'm not too familiar with him as much as everybody else, so I wasn't really sure exactly what type of player he was going to be or what he could be. So just more of an uncertainty rather than anything else. But no, not a very interesting pick at 14. And moving on to our last selections, we were going to do honorable mentions, but this video is running a bit late, so I think we're just going to end it at 15. At least for me, at 15, I have Consta Helenius. Now, I know that Tyler and Zach are very high on him. I just think for me, this is a guy that I don't really see the hype with him. Like I watched him, at the World Championships and the World Juniors, and obviously I'm a guy that evaluates, based on those competitions a lot more, just because they're easier to watch. And again, it's basically best on best, right? You're watching the best players go at it against each other, so it gives you an idea as to exactly where each player is ranked. In my opinion, I think Helenius is a good two-way forward. I think he's a guy that can bring some sort of offense to a team, and I think he could be a very good and responsible player for a team. I'm just not sure how much offensive upside there is with him. I know he had a really good year in Liga, but for me, I think Liga is a very tough league to really look at, just because it's not necessarily the most competitive league. The SHL is ahead of it. The Russian league's ahead of it. So, obviously being the 4th best league in terms of competition, I think is a little bit of, a step back. And I don't think there's as much of, let's say, leeway compared to, let's say, a guy coming from the SHL in Nygaard or the KHL, let's say, in terms of, a guy like Silayev or obviously Demidov. So I think for Helenius, I'm not too high on him. I like the tools that he has, but again, I'm not sure where his potential lies. I don't even see him as a top 6 forward in the NHL. I see him more as a third line guy who could maybe get you 45 points, 40 points, and be a good two-way penalty killer. But that's about as high as I see him. I could be wrong. I'm just not a big fan of him, but I think that's the type of player that Yzerman would probably go for. Yzerman's a little bit different when it comes to what he does in terms of the draft. He goes off the board a little bit too much, but I think with Hellenius, he's going to see him as an opportunity to maybe, develop him into something that could work out for the Red Wings. So that's why I have Hellenius going 15 to Detroit. Zach?
Yeah. So, well, quickly on Brad Nygaard. He's my first Norwegian player to going off on my board. I think
Right.
the thing I'll say on him quickly is that I think he has the upside to be a gritty top 6 power forward at the NHL level. And I think he's somebody who, a lot of people have going in the second round, but I think he could surprise a lot of people going this way mid at basically the midway point of the first round.
Tyler, end it off.
This, I think, is where I have Michael Nygaard. For me, he is the perfect Steve Yzerman Detroit Red Wings prospect. As you notice with how Steve likes to build his teams, well,
I feel less about my selection now.
For me, sorry, he's got an incredible shot, like very underrated shot, and he's one of the hardest working guys I've ever seen. I'm on Luka. If he was still at 15th overall, I too would be going for a Michael Nygaard at this spot. I think you could get a 50 to 55 point guy who's just an absolute workhorse. He can play in a lot of situations. Good, maybe second line power play, and then a good first line penalty killer who just someone like a Zach Hyman, which for me, I'm a very huge fan of Zach Hyman, which as you all seen, he's done an incredible job at this playoff run.
Absolutely.
Yeah, he's been great.
And I like to maybe add a little bit of my honorable mentions if you guys are good with that too. If you want to add yours.
Just make it like, just make it like a little bit quick,
I have Carter Yakimchuk not even in the top 16, and here's the reason why. I don't think he's that great of a defenseman. I think he makes way too many mistakes, which for me, he's very risky, which I don't want to deal with that. I have a huge fan of Liam Greentree. I got to watch him a little bit. Not the best skater, but beautiful hands and a great mind. I got Trevor Connolly, which one of the more skilled guys of this draft, but obviously character issues depending on how he may evolve. And a guy like Michael Hage of the USHL for the Chicago Steel, which I'm also quite a fan on him, with maybe just add a little bit of size.
Interesting. I like those honorable mentions. I think they're good. Connolly, for me, I think he would have been higher on my list. The only problem with Connolly is obviously the character thing, and I think that's a big problem. If anyone knows what I'm talking about, just go on social media, search up Trevor Connolly. You'll understand what I'm talking about. But yeah, he's basically a very talented player, but obviously character is a big thing in the NHL, and I'm not sure exactly what type of where he's going to go. I think his range is very complicated just based on that. So that's my opinion. Zach, I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add before we end this off.
Well, you guys mentioned him quite a bit. Berkeley Catton is somebody I'm still high on for this draft. I have him going between the 16 to 18 range, either to St. Louis or maybe to a team like Chicago.
Interesting. All right. So thank you guys for watching. Tyler, it's been a pleasure to have you on. I know you'll be heading to the draft in Vegas. So have fun, enjoy yourself. Take some pictures, and obviously don't freak out too much if Yzerman makes another trade. But
no, I won't be pissed this time, considering we already seen all the crazy stuff. And was like, what on earth? Like, Andrew Gibson, and then this trade with Jake Wallman. Well, let's be patient. I think he's cooking. I think he knows what he's doing.
It's a long off season. Yeah, exactly.
Let's
give it time.
But yeah, so guys, thank you guys for watching. Please like and subscribe, and obviously, guys, leave a comment down below what you guys think the draft's gonna look like, and stay tuned. We'll do a recap video with Chris once the draft is over, just kind of going through our picks and giving our opinions. So stay tuned for that as well. And guys, thank you guys for watching. Peace.
Thanks, guys.
Peace.
Peace.